Yeah. To get there, the IT firms who are going to be in the lead, because as you mentioned, I mean, something discontinuous has happened
Yes.
in the whole world of technology. It's to do with information technology. I don't know what was the scaling factor you mentioned about the number of pieces of information that are out there and the number of people who are getting connected into these pieces of information. So you can see, I'm a physicist. When you get many more points interacting with many other points in every possible way, the possibilities are immense. It goes into geometric progressions. So what can happen if we tap into this is immense. So the IT firms somehow, like he mentioned, therefore it was about the information tone, and you may be in the lead to do that. But to get there, the IT firms of India are having the problems about enough people. They're growing, and numbers were mentioned of their growth, 40% a year and 50% a year, and so on. Yeah. And just think. So innovations in how you tap into resources. The sources you take them in from, maybe you don't even have them in the firm.
Right.
So we talked about extended networks, which are your resources on the talent side, on the people side also. So innovation in that regard, which ties back into this network which is toned into information, which is part of your resource also now, and to go forward. Okay, so I thought, yes, the first would be a response from all of you with regarding the goals.
I like it. I like it. I like it a lot. And Jay, I would simply say that it kind of fits the model. Clearly, as Arun said, it's got to be collaborative.
Right.
You don't stand a chance of doing this if it's not open. So you need a set of standards. You're not going to be able to pull this off, by yourself.
Right.
And I'm not sure that I'm sure that wasn't your goal, in the first place. And by the way, the rest of the world will benefit from this.
Right.
Because I'm sure we're going to have to do this for rupees a day.
Yep.
Or else you don't get to 1 billion people here. And you've clearly, with the wonderful organization that you've got, demonstrated that. I think it's an exciting challenge. I think it's an exciting opportunity. And given the importance of India, we'll participate with you. I don't know what I'm doing, but we'll participate
That's the
with
spirit. I think that's exactly the spirit. And the spirit is to maybe ask the right question. If we're asking ourselves the right question, we'll automatically work ourselves to the answers. And I think if I just draw the analogy with just voice so that we can all put it in perspective, voice communication was about 15 to 20 cents a minute about 8-10 years back. About a year back, it was about 1.5 to 2 cents a minute. So it's come down in order of magnitude. And we're looking at voice coming down to almost a cent a minute. If that is the case, clearly for the right capital to be invested and for the right kind of services to be delivered, it really requires business model innovation, and which is what has been done on the voice side. And similarly on the data side, but not for application services and information services. So the huge opportunity that exists out here is in essence to go from invention to innovation along the lines of simply saying where Moore's meets Gilders meets Metcalfe's. So we all think about Moore's and transistors and computers getting faster and faster. We think about Gilders and bandwidth getting more and more prevalent. Arun, to your point, that really results in the combinatorial explosion, the n-squared phenomenon. And that's where Metcalfe's kicks in. Once Metcalfe's kicks in, and you put in, and it's absolutely got to be an open standard. It cannot be proprietary. It's got to create communities of interest. It's got to create developers that come in and do stuff around it. It's got to create loosely coupled systems. And for all of that to kick in, there's a whole lot of technology innovation, a whole lot of partner ecosystems that need to come in, and frankly, at the right economic model so that there is a value network. Every member participating in this ecosystem should see value that's derived in that entire piece. The objective is very big, the goal is very large, and there's a huge fortune lying out there. And I do echo C.K. Prahlad's comment on fortune at the bottom of the pyramid. And I do pick up, Arun, on your point, we must translate that to income at the bottom of the pyramid as well. And I think that's where your comments on microeconomy or even nano-economies kick in. So there is a very large opportunity, and at least the first half of this century is probably going to keep us busy. I think it's really, really going to keep us busy in that perspective.
Your firm has a huge experience in creating networks in technology and working in them. What are your thoughts about the big opportunity in this century?
Well, I think I look at why is it difficult? Because what Nick did a brilliant job in really explaining innovation as an agenda. And the question is, why is it so difficult? And I think this is the challenge that we have to overcome, is understanding that and recognizing that innovation, to make it real, is difficult because inherent in it is a paradox. And I refer to Henry Chesbrough's book, Open Innovation, where the first sentence, first chapter, is that most innovations fail, and companies that don't innovate die. So what we're involved in is something that is contrary to everything we've been brought up to as managers, to execute. Managers execute to succeed. They don't execute to fail. And so there's a natural process and evolution in management to take less risk so that we have a greater probability of success. And in that process, we kill the ability to innovate. And it's mastering that paradox of recognizing that most of what we're going to do in trying to solve those problems will fail, but if we don't do it, we will certainly fail, and that challenge is there. So I like the idea of focusing on a big picture problem, because I think innovation only really results when there's a problem that's being addressed. Otherwise, it just becomes a creative exercise in invention, which is an important part of it. But it's the problem set that I think is really a fantastic starting point on it. And the question then is, how do we change? What are the key issues to change? And the kind of things that I've seen are absolutely necessary for the change is, first of all, the leadership. If the leadership doesn't value what's happening and doesn't have clarity about what innovation is and doesn't have the objectives clear and the measures absolutely clear to the rest of the organization, then the organization is going to get confused. And when we talk about culture, culture is when we have an option and a choice between two things and the values that we manifest about what that choice is. It's absolutely critical that management makes those choices. And then what changes do we make in governance, organization, fora, in order for management to execute the agenda? And then finally, there's this issue around the processes. And the one process that is the biggest challenge to change in an established organization is the resource allocation process, is how you actually allocate your resource. And that's a derivative of your deliberate strategy, your emergent strategy, and the criteria you use to apply about the allocation of resources. So if there's one thing that can kill or one thing that can make success happen, is changing the logic and the value sets in the organization around how resources are allocated, because then the infrastructure will show up, it'll manifest. But it's always that trade-off and that paradox that management needs to master in order for this to be successful. So.
Well, that's really interesting. Because as you were speaking, I was recognizing, consult with lots of companies, and I find exactly that you ask people to prove what the return is going to be, and you give them the means of calculating, which is the one that you use on things which are already fairly well established. Tell me, what are we going to get at the end of it? What's the certainty of it? Give me the DCF, the discounted cash flow, on this idea so early. And so, but what do you do in substitute? I mean, when you get someone who says, look, I need some resource to support this idea, how do you judge it? How do you support it?
Well, I think it goes back to the vision. It goes back to what we're trying to do. And I'll refer a book that I think is my favorite book on innovation. It's called The Wedding of the Waters. And it's got nothing to do with innovation per se, but it's the story of the building of the Erie Canal that connected Lake Erie to Albany, okay, that connected that part of land. And there was a very big objective to do this. It was all about creating trade flows between the East and the West. And it transformed America, quite frankly. Before then, New Orleans was more important than New York City. But once this took place, everything shifted to the East. There was no talk about innovation. There was no talk about, we're going to invent something. No, they wanted to solve a particular problem economically and politically because there were people concerned of political fragmentation that was there. And then the resources arrived, and they arrived in the most paradoxical way, because most of us believe that business is best suited to actually addressing problems like this. Where in this case, it was actually the government of New York that was more successful. And we had the private enterprise fund, actually chaired by George Washington, trying to do the same thing up the Potomac, and he got utterly failed, when it was all business people. So that this, again, is the paradoxical element of it. The funding of this actually came from government agencies. There was nothing to do with innovation. It was all about solving a business problem, a political problem, and yet the innovations in engineering, in building canals that derived from that were extraordinary. So our focus, and I think my recommendation for anyone addressing this issue is focus on the problem, not on the invention. The inventions will follow, the resources will follow, everything will follow if we have a passion about the problem.